Your neighbor could legally be harboring a 600-pound apex predator right now, while you need a permit just to build a taller fence. The legal system regarding wild, exotic pets is a completely baffling nightmare of bizarre loopholes and absurd bans. Today, we are exposing the 50 most ridiculous laws governing the dangerous, weird, and untamed animals people actually keep in their homes. 1. In parts of Texas, it is statistically easier to buy a fully grown meat-eating tiger than it is to adopt a rescue dog from a local shelter. While humane societies demand background checks, home visits, and references to hand over a golden retriever, state law historically allowed you to purchase a big cat with nothing more than a basic permit and a dream. The real question is, why do lawmakers trust a guy with a backyard enclosure more than a family wanting a poodle? Would you want a neighbor whose security system is literally a Bengal tiger? 2. It is perfectly legal to own a pet skunk in the United Kingdom, but there is a massive, incredibly smelly catch. The law strictly forbids removing the animal's scent glands, claiming it is an unethical cosmetic procedure. This means you are legally required to live with a creature that could turn your living room into a hazardous waste zone at any second. Imagine having a roommate who gets slightly nervous and instantly destroys your property value. You have to wonder what kind of specific madness drives someone to invite that level of biological warfare into their home. 3. Missouri genuinely expects you to register your pet black bear, which sounds somewhat responsible until you read the fine print. You have to officially notify the state of the bear's exact location, as if the local authorities need a map to find the massive woodland creature destroying your patio furniture. Strangely, keeping the bear is heavily regulated, but the laws concerning what happens if the bear simply decides to leave your yard are shockingly vague. It is a terrifying level of bureaucratic optimism. 4. Nevada is famous for its wild nightlife, but its exotic animal laws are even wilder. You can legally own an elephant, a primate, or even a zebra without needing a special state permit. The state essentially treats a 3-ton pachyderm with the same legal scrutiny as a hamster. You could theoretically walk a zebra down the Las Vegas Strip, and the most trouble you would get into is a parking violation if you tied it to a meter. Do you think a society that trusts people with a pet elephant is highly enlightened or completely doomed? 5. Do not even bother trying to buy a platypus, because the Australian government has placed a total global embargo on these bizarre mammals. It is strictly illegal to export them for the private pet trade, and even foreign zoos are almost universally denied permits. Because they are highly sensitive venomous mammals that lay eggs and hunt using electroreception, they simply die in standard captivity. It is incredibly rare to find an animal so biologically weird that an entire continent legally refuses to share it with the rest of the world. 6. Florida requires you to have 1,000 hours of documented experience before you can legally own a venomous reptile. That is essentially 6 months of a full-time, unpaid internship dealing exclusively with creatures that can end your life with a single bite. The state demands you prove your competency in handling king cobras before letting you keep one in your sunroom. It makes sense, but it also raises a terrifying thought about whoever signs off on these logbooks. Who exactly is supervising the amateur snake-handling enthusiasts of Miami? 7. No matter how many billions of dollars you have in your bank account, you cannot legally buy a pet penguin. The International Antarctic Treaty strictly forbids the private ownership, sale, or trade of these beloved tuxedo-wearing birds. Even massive, highly funded private aquariums face intense governmental scrutiny, just to borrow them for educational displays. It is strangely comforting to know that some animals are so heavily protected that not even the richest eccentric billionaires can keep them in their bathtubs. 8. Owning a sloth in New York is completely illegal, which feels like a massive overreaction by the state legislature. Sloths move at a maximum speed of about 1 mile per hour, meaning they are arguably the least dangerous exotic animal on the planet. If a sloth escapes, a gentle stroll is more than enough to apprehend the fugitive. Yet, lawmakers categorize them alongside dangerous predators, banning them from apartments across the city. Are we really supposed to believe a slow-moving leaf eater poses a threat to the fast-paced streets of Manhattan? 9. Wisconsin law states that you can legally own a kangaroo, because nothing says Midwestern living quite like a marsupial that can kick through a car door. While other states ban exotic animals outright, Wisconsin embraces the chaos, allowing you to keep a boxing champion in your backyard. Imagine the local mailman trying to deliver a package while dodging an aggressive, bouncing Australian icon. The state only steps in if the animal becomes a public nuisance, completely ignoring the fact that a kangaroo in a snowstorm is already a walking public nuisance. 10. Several states allow you to keep capuchin monkeys, provided they are trained to assist humans with daily tasks. These highly intelligent primates can actually learn to microwave food, fetch water bottles, and even turn the pages of a book. However, the legal gray area is massive because monkeys are notoriously moody and prone to throwing sudden tantrums. The law basically says you can own a wild primate as long as it has a job. It is a fantastic arrangement right up until your furry assistant decides it wants a raise and throws your smartphone out the window. 11. In many agricultural states, massive, highly aggressive ostriches are completely exempt from exotic animal bans because farming laws treat them exactly like overgrown chickens. You do not need a specialized dangerous wildlife permit to own an 8-foot-tall, running bird of prey. You simply need to claim you are operating a highly unconventional poultry farm. 12. You can legally obtain a permit to keep a captive-bred cougar roaming in your backyard, yet owning a tiny, adorable hedgehog is strictly forbidden. This baffling legal paradox exists in Pennsylvania, where the state officially classifies the little prickly mammal as a destructive exotic species capable of transmitting diseases to local wildlife. You really have to marvel at a legislative system that looks at a deadly, meat-eating apex predator and a glorified pincushion, and confidently decides the pincushion is the actual, imminent threat to public safety. 13. Feathered structural engineers with zero respect for municipal infrastructure are completely illegal to own in several places, most notably Georgia. Quaker parrots are undeniably cute, chatty, and bright green, but they build incredibly elaborate communal nests that can weigh hundreds of pounds. When they inevitably choose local utility poles for their high-rise apartments, they cause catastrophic, citywide power outages. These birds are treated as if they are actively plotting against the electrical grid, proving that sometimes the cutest exotic pets are actually the most destructive saboteurs. 14. Evacuating your home for a Category 5 hurricane is incredibly stressful without having to figure out how to safely transport a spitting cobra. But to legally obtain a permit for a venomous reptile in the Sunshine State, you must submit a highly detailed, multi-page disaster evacuation plan to the government. You cannot buy a lethal serpent unless you officially document exactly how you intend to box it up during a massive storm. Does anyone really want to be stuck in highway traffic next to a guy fleeing a flood with a trunk full of angry mambas? 15. The ultimate ecological supervillain on the West Coast is a fuzzy creature usually kept by elementary school kids. Since the 1930s, the common pet store gerbil has been classified as highly illegal contraband in California. The agricultural department lives in perpetual fear that these tiny desert rodents will escape, multiply rapidly, and devour millions of dollars worth of vital crops. Consequently, possessing a fluffy little gerbil puts you on the wrong side of a very serious environmental protection law. 16. Getting a moose drunk is an actual, codified crime in Alaska. The mere existence of this highly specific legislation proves that at some point in history, someone absolutely invited a 1,000-pound antlered beast to a party and handed it a cold beer. A completely sober moose is already a terrifying walking traffic hazard, so a legally intoxicated one is a genuine public safety nightmare. 17. Just pause and imagine being the unfortunate medical professional tasked with holding a sharp needle while trying to get uncomfortably close to an uncooperative grizzly bear. Following a tragic, large-scale exotic animal escape in 2011, lawmakers required all owners of dangerous wild animals in Ohio to permanently microchip them. If you legally own a Siberian tiger, a veterinarian must physically inject a tracking chip under its skin to satisfy the Municipal Compliance Board. It sounds incredibly responsible until you realize someone actually has to perform that terrifying medical procedure. 18. Putting a strict financial bounty on inevitable property damage is the only way to legally own a dangerous primate down south. Despite having famously relaxed exotic animal regulations, Texas firmly forces monkey owners to maintain a liability insurance policy of exactly $100,000. The government knows perfectly well that chimpanzees are incredibly strong and prone to unpredictable violence. It is a cynical yet brilliant law that essentially says you can keep the powerful beast, but you better have the cash ready when it rips the bumper off a neighbor's car. 19. It absolutely does not matter if your black and white woodland friend was bred in captivity, completely domesticated, and surgically descented. Rabies vector laws in states like Massachusetts rigidly classify all skunks as unacceptable biological threats, completely ignoring any spotless veterinary paperwork you might currently possess. If you try to sneak one across state lines as a quirky house pet, wildlife officials have the absolute legal authority to confiscate it immediately. Local health departments simply do not care how cute, fluffy, or stink-free your illegal animal happens to be. 20. Nobody living in a tiny, overpriced studio apartment has the square footage to properly accommodate a miniature dinosaur. That purely logical assumption is baked right into the municipal health code of America's largest metropolis, which strictly outlaws the ownership of iguanas. City officials decided that these scaly reptiles carry an unacceptable risk of salmonella and simply grow far too massive for cramped urban living. If a landlord discovers your giant lizard basking under a heat lamp in Brooklyn, you are technically harboring an illegal, cold-blooded biological hazard. 21. Small turtles were federally banned from being sold as pets in 1975 for a ridiculously preventable reason. The FDA outlawed the sale of any turtle with a shell smaller than 4 inches simply because young children kept putting them inside their mouths. Apparently, too many toddlers were treating live, salmonella-carrying reptiles like extremely crunchy pacifiers. Instead of just expecting parents to monitor their kids, the government decided to completely crash the miniature turtle market. 22. Piranhas are perfectly legal to keep in a living room aquarium if you live in a freezing northern state like Michigan. However, bringing that exact same flesh-eating fish into warm southern states like Florida or Texas is a massive crime. Wildlife officials know that a flushed piranha will instantly freeze to death in a Detroit winter, but it could easily thrive and terrorize swimmers in a Miami canal. It is a rare legal situation where your ability to own a movie monster depends entirely on local winter temperatures. 23. Giant African land snails are heavily criminalized under federal agricultural laws, and you will understand why the moment you look at their bizarre diet. These massive, slimy creatures do not just eat plants. They actively consume the stucco and plaster right off the sides of houses to get calcium for their shells. Smuggling one into the country as a quirky pet means you are literally importing a slow-moving, house-eating bulldozer. It takes a special kind of crazy to buy a pet that actively devours the building you sleep in. 24. Santa Claus would be a massive criminal under federal agricultural laws. Thanks to the Reindeer Act of 1937, it is strictly illegal to own a live captive reindeer in Alaska unless you are of verified Alaskan native descent. The law was designed to protect the local indigenous herding industry, but it effectively creates a bizarre reality where the legality of owning a specific, magical winter animal depends entirely on your ethnic heritage. 25. Wolf-dog hybrids exist in an absolute legal nightmare due to a bizarre veterinary paradox. While some states allow you to own these majestic animals, there is no officially approved rabies vaccine for them. You can physically vaccinate the hybrid, but if it bites a neighbor, the government legally pretends the vaccine does not exist because it is only certified for standard domestic dogs. This bureaucratic loophole means your legally owned pet could be confiscated over a minor nip just because paperwork has not caught up with reality. 26. Bringing a Bengal cat to Hawaii is a fast track to hefty fines and confiscation. While these beautiful spotted felines are incredibly popular luxury pets on the mainland, island authorities ban them completely. Because Bengals are bred from wild Asian leopard cats, the state considers them highly skilled, untamed hunters that would absolutely decimate the delicate native bird populations. Hawaii essentially views your expensive designer living room leopard as an unstoppable, furry hitman that cannot be trusted near any tropical ecosystem. 27. Raccoons might literally dig through your trash every single night, but trying to legally keep one as a pet in most states is surprisingly difficult. In places like Kentucky, you can easily obtain an exotic permit for a foreign animal, but caging a native trash panda requires strict wildlife rehabilitation licenses. The law basically says you can import an exotic creature from across the globe, but putting a collar on the local masked bandit eating your leftover pizza is a serious wildlife violation. 28. You cannot legally own a native bat anywhere in the United States, completely crushing the dreams of aspiring superheroes. Federal and state laws strictly protect these winged mammals to fight against a devastating fungal disease called white nose syndrome, and because they are high-risk carriers for rabies. Even if you find an injured one in your attic, trying to nurse it back to health yourself is a criminal offense. Would you genuinely want to share your bedroom with an animal that navigates entirely by screaming in the dark? 29. Designing the perfect hybrid house cat gets complicated when laws aggressively target your breeding program. Savannah cats, which are a mix between a domestic cat and a wild African serval, are banned in several states depending entirely on their generation. If your cat is too closely related to its wild ancestor, it is legally classified as a dangerous wild animal rather than a domestic pet. You practically need a family tree and a genetics degree just to prove your spotted feline is legally allowed to sleep on your sofa. 30. Keeping a Gila monster in Arizona is a fascinating exercise in legal loopholes. State law makes it absolutely illegal to capture one of these venomous lizards from the desert, as they are a heavily protected native species. However, you can legally own one if you purchase a captive-bred lizard from a licensed out-of-state breeder and bring it back in. It is completely absurd that you can legally import a venomous reptile, but picking up the exact same animal from your own driveway makes you a wildlife poacher. 31. Buying a deadly, brightly colored amphibian sounds highly illegal, yet poison dart frogs are completely unregulated in the pet trade. The legal loophole is purely dietary. These tiny neon frogs only secrete their lethal toxins after eating specific, highly toxic ants found in the rainforest. Feed them standard pet store crickets, and they essentially become harmless, expensive decorations. The government allows you to legally buy an inherently deadly creature simply because they know you cannot source the ammunition it needs to kill you. 32. Wizarding fantasies are violently crushed by the federal government the moment you try to buy a snowy owl. Regardless of how many fantasy novels you have read, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act strictly criminalizes keeping native owls as pets in the United States. You can face federal charges and massive fines just for possessing a stray feather, let alone caging the actual bird. Wildlife agencies absolutely refuse to let a blockbuster movie franchise dictate the domestic bird market. 33. Your local mail carrier might unwittingly be delivering highly venomous cargo right to your doorstep. Under incredibly specific federal regulations, the United States Postal Service explicitly allows the mailing of live scorpions and tarantulas. While shipping a standard guinea pig is strictly forbidden, packaging a massive, hairy arachnid in a breathable cardboard box is perfectly compliant with federal transit laws. Do you feel comfortable knowing the same postal truck delivering your utility bill could also be transporting a box full of live scorpions? 34. You would assume Louisiana, the absolute swamp capital of America, would fully embrace pet alligators. Instead, the state strictly bans private citizens from keeping them as household pets. You can only legally own an alligator if you operate a commercial farm or an official educational exhibit. The local government knows perfectly well that letting the average citizen casually keep an apex swamp predator in a backyard swimming pool is a recipe for absolute disaster. 35. Cute. Gliding marsupials are treated like a looming agricultural apocalypse on the West Coast. California strictly bans sugar gliders, fearing these tiny, acrobatic creatures will escape, thrive in the warm climate, and rapidly strip native fruit orchards bare. If you are caught carrying one of these pocket-sized pets in Los Angeles, you face severe fines and immediate confiscation. The state essentially treats a wide-eyed, fluffy animal that comfortably fits inside a coffee mug as an imminent, highly mobile biological threat. 36. Importing a screeching desert predator from Africa is often legally easier than domesticating the animal living under your shed. In many jurisdictions, laws explicitly forbid you from keeping native wildlife like red foxes, classifying it as dangerous poaching. However, those same states will easily grant you an exotic permit to buy an African fennec fox. The legal system operates on the baffling logic that an animal perfectly adapted to your local environment is illegal, but a fragile, imported exotic is completely acceptable. 37. Riding a towering, spitting beast of burden through downtown traffic is technically protected under surprisingly old transportation laws. Because camels are historically classified as agricultural draft animals rather than wild exotic pets, you can legally own one in several arid states without a special permit. Since they are legally recognized as functional working animals, you could theoretically saddle one up and ride it right through a fast food drive-thru. Who needs a car when you have a street-legal desert tank that runs entirely on hay? 38. Saving an endangered species from extinction is a noble goal, unless you're doing it in your living room. Lemurs are critically endangered in their native Madagascar, yet it is completely legal to breed and sell them as household pets in states like North Carolina. This creates a deeply uncomfortable legal reality, where there are likely more of these incredibly rare primates living in American private homes than in the wild. The law permits private ownership, but aggressively ignores the massive ethical headache it creates. 39. Psychological trickery is a strict legal requirement if you want to keep captive flamingos. These iconic pink birds are so intensely social that they simply refuse to eat or breed unless they believe they are surrounded by a massive flock. To comply with basic animal welfare standards, private owners and zoos are mandated to place giant mirrors inside their enclosures. The birds see their own reflections, assume it is a massive party, and instantly become happy. It is officially codified in animal husbandry regulations to successfully gaslight your own birds. 40. Getting around strict suburban exotic pet bans is incredibly easy if you happen to own a single sheep. In many strict municipalities, you cannot legally keep a llama as a fun backyard pet, but you can absolutely keep one if you officially register it as a working livestock guardian. These fluffy, long-necked animals are notoriously aggressive toward coyotes, so the law treats them as vital farm security. It is a fantastic legal loophole that transforms a spitting, fuzzy lawnmower into a highly respected, tax-exempt security guard. 41. Owning a wallaby in your backyard is perfectly legal in surprisingly many states, but local law enforcement absolutely hates dealing with them. Because these miniature kangaroos are notorious escape artists, police frequently receive panicked emergency calls from neighbors reporting a giant, mutant rat hopping wildly through suburbia. You do not need a dangerous animal permit to buy one, but you will definitely need a fantastic lawyer when your bouncing marsupial inevitably causes a massive neighborhood traffic jam. 42. Michigan still has an incredibly specific, hilarious, and completely real law making it strictly illegal to tie your pet alligator to a fire hydrant. The mere existence of this highly targeted legislation proves that during some chaotic era, enough people were walking their massive, scaly reptiles downtown and casually parking them on the sidewalk. While owning a gator is heavily restricted now, you really have to admire the wild confidence of someone treating a literal swamp monster like a golden retriever at a coffee shop. 43. Buying a massive alligator snapping turtle is legal in many local jurisdictions, but moving it across state lines instantly makes you a federal criminal. Under the Lacey Act, transporting one of these prehistoric reptiles without federal clearance is considered interstate wildlife trafficking. You can legally keep a living dinosaur that can snap a thick broomstick in half in your backyard pond, but the moment you put it in your car for a road trip, you are facing serious federal prison time. 44. Imagine a tiny, vibrating bird causing a multi-million-dollar agricultural collapse. That is exactly why bringing a hummingbird to the Hawaiian Islands is strictly classified as a crime. If these hyperactive little creatures were allowed to cross-pollinate the local pineapple crops, the fruit would develop hard, practically inedible seeds. The government treats a beautiful, microscopic bird like a high-level ecological criminal to protect their main export. Would you ever guess that a creature weighing less than a single penny could single-handedly destroy an entire tropical farming economy? 45. Buying a tarantula is perfectly legal in almost every state, but the moment you try to breed them for profit in your home, you might trigger strict local agricultural laws. Many municipalities classify large-scale insect and arachnid breeding as an unregulated farming operation. You can legally own one massive hairy spider as a pet, but if your female tarantula suddenly drops an egg sac with 500 babies, you are technically operating an illegal, unlicensed livestock farm. 46. Registering your suburban home as an official zoo is practically the only way you can legally keep a pygmy hippopotamus. These incredibly rare, highly aggressive miniature river horses cannot be owned as standard pets anywhere in America. To legally acquire one, you must obtain a federal exhibitor's license, essentially forcing you to prove your backyard is a legitimate, educational zoological facility. Imagine having to charge your neighbors an entry ticket just to legally keep your shiny aquatic potato. 47. Keeping a binturong, also known as a bear cat, presents an incredibly weird, highly specific legal and olfactory problem. These bizarre Southeast Asian carnivores naturally secrete an oil that smells exactly like hot, heavily buttered movie theater popcorn. While legally permitted under obscure small carnivore laws in some states, owners have faced bizarre nuisance lawsuits from neighbors complaining about the constant, overwhelming scent of artificial butter. It is possibly the only legal battle in history caused entirely by a naturally delicious-smelling animal. 48. Arcadia, California, fiercely protects its feral peacocks, making it completely illegal to harm or even aggressively shoo them away from your property. If a massive peacock decides to violently peck its own reflection in your expensive sports car, you legally just have to stand there and watch your paint job get absolutely destroyed. You cannot touch them or move them. 49. Vampire deer are entirely real, and yes, you can actually legally own them. The muntjac is a tiny deer species with protruding fangs that drops its antlers and barks loudly like a dog. Because they are technically classified as exotic cervids, you can easily keep one on a private ranch in states like Texas. It is completely baffling that a creature sounding like a canine, looking like Bambi, and sporting Dracula teeth is legally viewed as standard alternative livestock. Alright, we have explored 49 bizarre regulations, and there is only one final point remaining. But before we reveal number 50, it is time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most unbelievable rule on today's list easily goes to Michigan strictly outlawing tying your pet alligator to a fire hydrant. Simply because it proves someone actually took a literal swamp monster for a downtown stroll and parked it like a bicycle. Do you agree with our verdict, or did another law earn that dubious honor? Let us know in the comments. And now, our final entry. 50. In a brilliant display of highly specific bureaucracy, it is legally required in parts of Australia to hold a specialized government permit just to keep a stick insect. That is right. A bug that has evolved entirely to look exactly like a piece of dead wood is strictly regulated by municipal wildlife authorities. They enforce strict containment rules because if these masters of camouflage escape into the local trees, you will literally never find them again. You really have to appreciate a government that demands official paperwork for a literal twig. We legally trust average citizens with lethal reptiles but ban tiny woodland rodents. Should the government have the absolute right to ban you from owning a wild animal? Or is it a severe violation of your personal freedom? Let the arguments fly in the comments below. If you want more unbelievable stories exposing our crazy world, hit that subscribe button and leave a like before you go.